Welcome back, everyone. For today's deep dive, we're going to be diving into the world of Chinese ceramics, authentication specifically. You know, I love this stuff. And you guys sent in some amazing excerpts from this Ojini Yubodi if.pdf. It's wild. Seems to be a whole transcript of a documentary series on authenticating ceramics.
Yeah, it's an incredible resource. It really takes you on a journey through the history, the artistry, the sheer technical brilliance of it all. And, you really can't overstate how crucial that historical context is when it comes to authentication.
For sure, for sure. You know, one of the things I loved is how they kicked things off. They had this analogy about authenticating ceramics being like seeing a woman without makeup.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's all about the essence, right?
Exactly. It's not just about appearances. It's about understanding the core of what makes something authentic. Like with pottery and porcelain, the essence is in the clay body.
The clay body.
It's fundamental. Of course, firing temperature and glaze are important too, but you've got to start with that core, that essence.
It's so true. And speaking of getting down to the essence, this next part totally caught me off guard. It mentions people questioning if porcelain even existed in ancient times. Because, get this, there wasn't a character for it. I mean, can you imagine?
It is interesting how language and material culture intersect, isn't it? We might not have had today's specific character for porcelain back then, but that doesn't mean they didn't have a way to refer to it. The Zurites, for example, mentions the character fang. It's possible that evolved into the term we use today.
Oh, fascinating. So it was there all along, hidden in plain sight. Okay, let's talk kilns for a minute. Specifically, those massive dragon kilns. The transcript describes them in such detail, I felt like I could feel the heat.
Oh, they were incredible feats of engineering, those dragon kilns. They were all about control, precise temperature control, and creating that reducing atmosphere, which, as you know, is key for achieving Celadon's vibrant green. Imagine a whole line of kilns built up a slope like a dragon snaking up a mountain.
It's an incredible visual, so it's not just about the materials, it's the entire environment they're fired in that's so important.
Absolutely. The kiln's atmosphere interacts with the glaze during firing, and it's all about chemistry, really. By manipulating the oxygen levels, artisans could fine-tune the chemical reactions happening within the glaze and ultimately control the final color.
It's like alchemy. Okay, we have to talk about Junware. This was one of my favorite parts. The documentary mentions Emperor Huzong being a huge fan. They were even numbering Junware pieces for sets.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And that attention to detail, that dedication to perfection, is reflected in the glaze itself.
Absolutely.
That unique, almost smoky or foggy appearance, especially under magnification, is due to the presence of phosphate oxide in the glaze.
I never knew that. It's amazing how such a seemingly small addition can have such a dramatic impact on the final look.
It really is.
And speaking of dramatic, the transcript mentions something called Yaobian.
Yes, furnace transmutation.
This sounds almost mythical.
It's this amazing phenomenon where you get this incredible range of colors in Junware, all from these subtle variations in the firing atmosphere. We're talking everything from the palest moon white to the richest purples and reds. It's almost as if the kiln itself has a hand in the artistic process.
Incredible. And of course, where there's beauty, there are those who try to replicate it, right? The transcript mentions fake Junware was already a problem way back in the Yuan dynasty. And then there's this liquid body technique they talk about. It sounds so strange.
It is fascinating. It's a method of creating Junware without the traditional hand-shaping methods. Instead, they pour liquid clay into plaster molds. Now, while this can produce pieces that appear similar to genuine Junware at first glance, there are often telltale signs.
So how can you tell?
Well, for instance, the way the glaze interacts with the mold can sometimes create subtle differences in texture, or even tiny air bubbles that wouldn't be present in a traditionally made piece.
It's all in the details. Okay, I want to shift gears for a moment and touch on Jianyang ware and those incredible black glazes. According to this transcript, it became hugely popular for tea drinking, even replacing green wares at one point. Any idea why that was?
It's a great example of how intertwined these ceramics are with broader cultural trends. In this case, it's all about the evolution of tea culture in China. See, Jianyang ware wasn't just about aesthetics. It was designed with a specific purpose in mind. The shape of those bowls with their deep bases, wide inner bases, and those averted rims, it was all very deliberate.
So form following function even in the art world.
Precisely.
One of the coolest things I came across in this document was the discovery of these clay pads used in firing Jianyang ware. They're incredible. Some have inscriptions on them, family names even. It's like having a direct line to the people who commissioned these pieces.
I know, it's amazing. Those inscriptions are like hidden signatures, offering us these tantalizing glimpses into the past. And they're not just interesting from a historical perspective, they can actually be incredibly valuable clues for authentication as well.
So it's like a puzzle, putting all these pieces together.
Exactly. In fact, scientists have been conducting all sorts of fascinating experiments on Jianyangware shards, and they've discovered that variations in the firing atmosphere can actually dramatically impact the final look of both the glaze and the body of the piece.
It really goes to show how much thought and precision went into every single step of the process.
Absolutely. And it really highlights why careful observation is absolutely essential when you're trying to authenticate these pieces. Every detail matters.
Okay, Tang San Kai. I have to say, this is one of my absolute favorites. Those colors, those incredible horses, it's just breathtaking.
Oh, it truly is a feast for the eyes, isn't it? Tang Sangtai reflects this incredible period of cultural exchange and artistic innovation during the Tang Dynasty. And those vibrant colors, those incredibly detailed figures, they're not just decorative, they tell a story.
It's like they're visual history books.
Precisely. For example, you mentioned those horses. The type of horse depicted, even something as subtle as the way its mane was trimmed, those details could tell you a lot about the owner's social standing in Tang society.
Wow. It's incredible how each piece holds so much history.
It really is.
And of course, with pieces as valuable and as sought after as these, there are always going to be those who try to create fakes. The document talks about how skilled these modern forgers have become. They can artificially age ceramics, recreate specific glaze effects, even mimic wear patterns so that a piece looks like it's been buried for centuries.
It really is a constant game of cat and mouse. But don't be discouraged. With a keen eye and an understanding of what to look for, you can avoid being duped. The key is careful observation. Examine the clay body, the glaze, how they interact. Ask yourself, are there any inconsistencies? Do the wear patterns look natural? And be wary of pieces that seem too perfect. They might be just that.
So in essence, it's about trusting your gut.
Right.
And not being afraid to ask questions.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to seek out expert opinions, to compare pieces with known authentic examples. The more you learn, the more confident you'll become. After all, the joy of collecting comes from knowing you have something genuine, something with real historical significance.
You know, it's amazing how this whole deep dive into authentication is really a deep dive into the history of these ceramics too. Like the document goes into this whole fascinating evolution of Junware, from those prized imperial pieces to the rise of fakes during the Yuan dynasty. It's a whole journey.
It really is, and it shows how intertwined ceramics are with the social and economic, even political shifts of their time, like how Junware production spread beyond Henan province. This document mentions Yixing Junware, Guangdong Shiwanware. Would you consider those real Junware, or are they more like, regional variations?
That is a fantastic question. It's like the line between real and fake isn't always so clear-cut with something like Junware, especially with something that has such a long history.
Exactly. We often use Jinware as a kind of umbrella term encompassing a whole range of ceramics with those characteristic glaze effects. But it doesn't mean they were all made in the same place or even the same period, right?
Right. So much nuance.
Yeah.
So how do we navigate those shades of gray?
Well, that's where a discerning eye and a good grasp of the details become really important. The transcript actually points out some key differences between Song Dynasty Junware and later imitations.
Oh.
Yeah, so one of the telltale signs of a genuine Song Junware piece, especially those Imperial Jungguan pieces, are these, well, they call them earthworm tracks you sometimes find in the glaze.
Earthworm tracks. That sounds kind of gross, honestly. What are those?
They're actually these tiny, small cracks in the glaze. And it's not a flaw. It's actually caused by the glaze shrinking and cracking during the firing. Just a natural consequence of the techniques used back then.
So a flaw, that's actually a sign of authenticity. Who knew?
It's all about knowing what to look for. Those crackle patterns, the way the glaze flows, how thick it is, those details help build a picture of a piece's origin.
Like a ceramic detective. We've got to watch out for red herrings, I bet.
Oh, for sure. Like, the document mentions this modern kiln in Henan. They're producing Junware using a manto kiln, or sometimes they call it a steamed bread kiln. Basically, it's designed to, well, replicate the effects of those old dragon kilns we were talking about.
Wow, that's fascinating. So even with technology, it's impossible to fully replicate those ancient techniques.
Well, modern kilns can certainly mimic certain aspects, but they can't capture everything. There's a certain, how do you say, a certain character, a fingerprint that comes from those kilns that have been seasoned by time.
Makes sense. The transcript touches on Jinjunware, too. What makes that one stand out?
Jinjunwei is interesting because it usually has a brighter, almost sky blue glaze compared to the deeper tones of the Songjunware. And the glaze tends to be a bit thinner on Jinjunware too, which lets more of the clay body peek through.
So even within Junware, there's so much variation. It's incredible.
Exactly. It really shows how much the specifics, the time and place influence these ceramics. It's an endless journey of discovery, each piece with its own story waiting to be uncovered.
Oh, speaking of stories, the section on the Yuan dynasty was fascinating. It mentions Shangdu, the Mongol capital. It sounds incredible. Open gates, bustling trade, hordes of soldiers.
It was a really interesting time, a melting pot of cultures, and you see that reflected in the ceramics of that era.
And it sounds like it wasn't just cultural exchange that was booming. This document says the flourishing commerce at the time also led to, a surge in fake Junware.
It seems even then the demand for these objects, sometimes it outpaced the ability to produce authentically, which is a pattern that unfortunately continues even today.
Yeah, that's a good point. Speaking of which, this section on the Lushan kilns in modern Beijing was kind of concerning. Apparently, these kilns churn out a crazy amount of fake ceramics. Everything from Dangsankai to black glazes, even just simple white wares.
The Lushan kilns really highlight the ongoing challenge in this field, that constant tension between authenticity and deception. They've become quite infamous for being able to copy a huge range of styles, which makes things even harder for collectors.
It sounds like forgers are always upping their game.
They are, which means collectors and enthusiasts need to be extra vigilant. But vigilance shouldn't be confused with fear, of course. It should fuel your curiosity. Do your research, ask questions, don't be afraid to challenge what you see.
What are some good ways listeners can protect themselves from being fooled?
The most important thing is to be informed. Don't be afraid to ask questions, get second opinions, seek out experts if you're unsure about a piece.
A healthy dose of skepticism never hurts, right?
Exactly. But don't let that overshadow your passion. Approach every piece with curiosity, with an eagerness to learn. That's what makes this whole world so rewarding.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive.
Yeah.
From ancient kilns to, modern-day forgers and everything in between. It really goes to show you how much there is to learn about Chinese ceramics.
It's a testament to their enduring appeal, isn't it? These objects are not just beautiful to look at, they're like little pieces of history just waiting to be understood. Speaking of which, the part in the Jane Yang-Ware transcript about using microscopes to examine the pieces really caught my eye. Verification under the lens, they called it.
Like ceramic detectives.
Yeah.
I love it. So it's not just about what you see on the surface. You have to go deeper into the glaze, the clay.
Exactly. Microscopic analysis has really revolutionized how we authenticate these pieces. It allows us to see the structure of the glaze, the composition of the clay, even the effects of the firing process in such detail.
Wow, that's incredible.
It really is like getting a glimpse into the DNA of these objects.
So what kind of things can you actually learn from, like a microscopic analysis?
Oh, so much. We can often identify the type of kiln that was used, the region where the clay came from, even the approximate age of a piece. It's incredibly powerful stuff.
It's mind-blowing. You know, one of the things that I found so fascinating was how connected the design of Jianyang ware is to the whole culture of tea drinking. I mean, who would have thought that the shape of a tea bowl was so important?
It's a great example of how form follows function. Those bowls with their wide bases and those beautiful flared rims, they weren't just designed to look pretty, they were made to enhance the entire experience of drinking tea.
So every detail, every curve had a purpose.
Absolutely. They were very intentional about it. For example, during the Song Dynasty, there was this method of tea preparation called dusha.
Dusha?
Yeah. It involved whisking powdered tea with hot water and the Jianyang ware bowls. They were specifically designed to make that whisking easier. They even helped showcase that beautiful froth that formed on top.
That's incredible. And to think, we only know that because of these bowls, because they survived all these years.
It really is remarkable, isn't it? And speaking of those little windows into the past, remember those clay pads with the inscriptions we were talking about?
Oh yeah, those were so cool.
Well, they're not just charming relics. They actually provide us with invaluable context. They give us these little glimpses into the lives of the people who actually made and used these objects.
It's all connected. It's amazing how something so small can tell us so much.
Absolutely. Oh, and this is interesting. The transcript also mentions some scientific experiments that have been done on Jianyang ware shards. Did you get to that part?
I did. It's amazing how different firing atmospheres can completely change the final look of a piece.
Isn't it incredible? The colors, the texture, everything changes. It really highlights the skill, the knowledge that those artisans had.
And it shows just how much goes into authenticating these pieces. It's not just about looking at them, it's about understanding the science behind them.
Precisely. It's a multifaceted field, that's for sure. And the more we learn, the more fascinating it becomes.
It really does. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Chinese ceramics, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from all of this?
That's easy. Never stop being curious. Question what you see, do your research, and most importantly, enjoy the journey. There's a whole world of beauty and history to discover in these objects.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And with that, we want to thank you, our amazing listeners, for joining us on this journey into the captivating world of Chinese ceramics. Until next time, happy collecting.